Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great hall, his uniform pressed and clean despite the long journey to Nexus Prime. Around him, hundreds of alien beings filled the massive chamber, their eyes, in every color and shape possible, all focused on him with the same look: disgust, fear, anger. The Galactic Council chamber stretched up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. Golden light came from crystal formations that had grown here for thousands of years. This place had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Today, it would witness the exile of humanity from galactic society. Chancellor Vexstar rose from his floating throne. The tall, thin Zephyrian looked down at Jake with his 4 purple eyes. His skin was pale blue and covered in scales that caught the light like diamonds. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Captain Morrison of the human species," Vexstar began, his words careful and cold, "you stand before this council to hear the judgment of the galaxy. Your species has been found guilty of disrupting the peace that has lasted for 300 years. Jake kept his face calm, but his hands were tight fists at his sides. Behind him stood Dr. Lisa Chen and Commander Ryan Torres, the only other humans allowed in the chamber. Lisa was small and quiet, but her mind was sharp as any blade. Ryan was built like a mountain and had fought in more battles than most aliens had seen in their long lives. "We dispute these charges," Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the huge room. "Humanity has only defended itself and protected smaller species from attack." A sound like angry insects filled the chamber as hundreds of aliens made noises of disagreement. Chancellor Vexstar raised one long arm, and silence fell immediately. "The evidence is clear," said Ambassador Kethra, the Andromedan representative. "Her people looked like humans, but with silver skin and eyes like black holes. 3 separate conflicts in the past 5 years. Each time, humans were involved. Each time, violence followed. Each time, we were protecting someone who could not protect themselves," Jake replied. "The Tau mining colonies were being raided by pirates. The Kepler research station was under siege. The trade routes through the Vega system were being blocked by warships. Violence is not the answer," Chancellor Vexstar said. "The galaxy has learned this truth over millions of years. War brings only death and suffering. Peace comes through negotiation and compromise." Lisa stepped forward, her voice clear and strong despite her size. "With respect, Chancellor, some beings cannot be negotiated with. Pirates do not stop raiding because you ask them nicely. Bullies do not leave others alone because of kind words." "This is exactly what we mean," said another voice from the crowd. Councillor Prex of the Centauri Republic stood up. His people were known for their love of art and beauty, not war. "Humans think only of fighting. You solve every problem with weapons and violence." "That is not true," Ryan said, speaking for the first time. His deep voice was like distant thunder. "We build hospitals on worlds that have never seen doctors. We share our food with hungry colonies. We teach farming to species that have forgotten how to grow their own crops. And yet you carry weapons everywhere you go," Vexstar replied. "Your ships have more guns than science equipment. Your colonies have walls and guards." Jake felt his patience wearing thin. "We carry weapons because the galaxy is not as peaceful as you pretend it is. There are pirates in the outer systems. There are slave traders who steal entire populations. There are warlords who take what they want by force. These problems existed before humans joined the galaxy," said Ambassador Kethra. "Somehow we managed to deal with them without starting wars." "You managed by ignoring them," Lisa said, her voice getting louder. "You let smaller species suffer because helping them would be inconvenient. You let pirates operate because they stay away from your core worlds." The chamber erupted in angry sounds again. This time, Vexstar let the noise continue for several minutes before calling for quiet. "The decision has been made," the Chancellor announced. "The Galactic Council votes to remove humanity from galactic civilization. You have 30 standard days to withdraw all colonies, bases, and citizens beyond the Outer Rim boundary." Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He had known this was coming, but hearing the words still hurt. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The mistake was allowing humans into the galaxy in the first place," Vexstar replied. "You were too young, too violent, too unpredictable. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have learned to control your aggressive nature, you may petition to return. What happens when you face a threat that cannot be negotiated with? Jake asked. What happens when someone comes to the galaxy who does not care about your laws or your peace? The galaxy has survived for millions of years without humans, said Counselor Prex. We will continue to survive long after you are gone. Jake looked around the chamber one last time. These beings, with their ancient civilizations and their proud histories, could not see past their own fear and prejudice. They thought peace meant weakness, that avoiding conflict was the same as preventing it. Very well, Jake said finally. Humanity will leave as ordered. But remember this day, Chancellor. Remember it when you need help and there are no humans. Left to give it, turned and walked toward the exit, Lisa and Ryan following close behind. The aliens watched them go in silence, their judgment complete. Outside the chamber, the three humans walked through corridors filled with beings from 100 different worlds. None of them met the humans' eyes. Some moved away as they passed, as if being human was a disease they might catch. 30 days, Ryan said when they reached their ship. That is not much time to move 3 million people. We will manage, Jake replied. We always do. Lisa was quiet as they boarded their vessel, a sleek ship called the New Dawn. As they prepared for departure, she finally spoke. Jake, I am picking up strange energy readings from the deep space sensors. What kind of readings? Jake asked, settling into the captain's chair. I do not know, Lisa admitted, staring at her instruments. The signals are coming from beyond the galactic rim, far past any explored system. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Jake looked at the data on his screen. The readings were faint, but definitely there. Like something massive was moving in the empty space between galaxies. File a report with the Council, Jake said. Let them know what we found. Do you think they will listen? Ryan asked Jake was. Quiet for a moment, watching Nexus Prime grow smaller in the rear display. No, he said finally, but we will have done our duty. As the New Dawn jumped to hyperspace, beginning the long journey home, none of them knew that the energy readings Lisa had detected were just the beginning. Something ancient and hungry was stirring in the darkness between stars, drawn by the growing activity in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had made their choice. They believed the galaxy was safer without humans. Soon, they would discover just how wrong they were. The exile had begun. But for humanity, it would not be an ending. It would be a new beginning. One that would prepare them for the greatest challenge the galaxy had ever faced in 30 days. The last human ship would cross the outer rim boundary. The galaxy would celebrate its return to peace and order. In the empty darkness of space, something waited and watched and planned. The Council thought they no longer needed humans. Time would prove them very, very wrong. 8 years had passed since the exile. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the sunrise paint the sky of New Eden in shades of gold and red. Colony world spread out below him, covered in green fields and silver cities. It was hard to believe this empty planet had been nothing but rock and ice when they first arrived. The morning reports, Admiral said his aide, Lieutenant Ben Carter. The young man had been just a boy when humanity left the galaxy. He was a skilled officer who had never known life under the Council's rule. Jake took the datapad and smiled. At what he saw, food production was up 12%. The new fusion plants were working perfectly. I mean, 3 more ships would be ready for launch next month. Humanity was not just surviving in exile. They were thriving. Any word from the exploration teams? Jake asked. Captain Amy Brooks reports from the Kepler system, Ben replied. Her team has made another discovery in the ruins. Jake nodded. Amy was the daughter of one of his old friends, a bright young woman who had chosen archaeology over military service. Her work in the ancient ruins had become very important to their survival. Down on the planet's surface, engineer Marcus Webb wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched his latest creation come to life. The fusion reactor was the size of a small building, but it would power half the colony. More importantly, it was completely human design, built with materials they had mined and refined themselves. She is beautiful, said his assistant, Kate Sullivan. Kate had been a ship's engineer when they left the galaxy. Now she commanded their growing defense fleet. How much power will she produce? Enough to run the new shipyard and still have power left over, Marcus replied with pride. And she is twice as efficient as anything the Council ever built. Kate smiled. Good. We will need all the power we can get for the new ships. Marcus had spent years working on the fusion technology. Without access to galactic trade networks, humanity had been forced to create everything from scratch. They discovered was that necessity had made them better engineers than they ever thought possible. The new human ships were faster than Council vessels. Their hulls were stronger. Their weapons hit harder. Marcus had taken the basic fusion drive and completely redesigned it, creating something that could push a ship to speeds the galaxy had never seen. Meanwhile, 3 systems away, Dr. Alex Rodriguez carefully brushed dust from an ancient stone tablet. The Kepler ruins were the remains of a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. But their warnings were still carved in stone, waiting for someone smart enough to read them. "Does this one say?" asked Captain Amy Brooks, kneeling beside him in the underground chamber. Alex squinted at the strange symbols. It spent years learning to read the ancient language. "It talks about the Devourers," he said slowly. "Machine beings that ate entire worlds." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. 8 worlds? What does that mean? According to this, they would strip a planet of all life and resources, Alex replied. The text says they came from the dark space between galaxies. They would consume everything in their path, then move on to the next system. What happened to them? Alex pointed to another section of the tablet. This says they went dormant after, consuming most of this galaxy's outer rim. The remaining civilizations built these ruins as a warning for future generations. Amy stood up and looked around the chamber. The walls were covered in star maps and technical diagrams. "Do we know where they went to sleep? Some of these maps might tell us," Alex said. "But it will take time to translate everything." Amy activated her communication device. "Brooks 2 New Horizon. We need more time here. These ruins contain information about a threat to the entire galaxy." Jake's voice came back through the speaker. "Understood, Captain. Take all the time you need." Back on New Eden, Admiral Kate Sullivan reviewed the latest reports from her patrol ships. Humanity now controlled 12 star systems beyond the outer rim. They had established colonies on 6 worlds and mining operations on dozens of asteroids and moons. More importantly, they had made friends. The Volari were a species of small, furry beings who had been ignored by the Galactic Council for centuries. When human ships first arrived in their system, the Volari expected to be conquered or enslaved. Instead, the humans offered trade and friendship. "The Volari shipment arrived this morning," reported Commander Tony Miller, Kate's second in command. "Rare metals in exchange for medical supplies and farming equipment." "Good," Kate replied. "What about the Cathani?" The Cathani were reptilian beings who lived in the asteroid belts. They were master miners, but had never learned to grow food. Humanity had traded agricultural knowledge for mining expertise, creating a partnership that benefited both species. "Want to join our defense pact?" Tony said. "Apparently there have been pirate attacks near their home system." Kate was not surprised. Without the Council's patrol ships, the outer systems had become dangerous. Pirates and raiders operated freely, knowing that no one would come to help their victims. Approve their request, Kate decided. But make sure they understand that we all work together. No one species is in charge. This was something new in galactic history. Instead of one powerful species dominating others, humanity was building partnerships. Each species contributed what they did best, and everyone benefited. The human defense fleet had grown from the original Exile ships to over 200 vessels. Most were small patrol craft, but some were massive battleships equipped with Marcus Webb's revolutionary weapons and shields. Jake often stood on his bridge and wondered what the Council thought about humanity's exile now. Did they know that? Humans had not simply disappeared? Did they care that an entire section of the galaxy was now protected by human ships and human allies? "Admiral," said Lieutenant Carter, interrupting his thoughts. "Long-range sensors are detecting something unusual. Jake turned to look at the display screen. What kind of unusual? Energy signatures from deep space, Carter replied. Far beyond any known system. The readings are massive, sir. Whatever's out there is bigger than anything we've ever seen.
Ow.
Jake felt his blood turn cold. He remembered Dr. Lisa Chen's readings 8 years ago, just before they left Council space. How far away? Hard to tell, sir. The signals are very faint, but they seem to be getting stronger. Jake stared at the screen, watching the tiny blips that represented unknown energy sources. Something was moving in the darkness between galaxies. Something huge. Send a message to Dr. Rodriguez on Kepler, Jake ordered. Tell him we need those translations now. And contact Admiral Sullivan. I want all patrol ships to report anything unusual. Yes, sir. Jake continued to watch the display as the bridge crew worked around him. 8 years ago, the Galactic Council had exiled humanity for being too violent, too unpredictable. Wanted peace and order above all else. But Jake remembered his final words to Chancellor Vexstar. He had warned them about threats that could not be negotiated with. He had asked what would happen when someone came who did not care about their laws or their peace. The energy readings on his screen were growing stronger each day. Something was waking up in the void between stars. Something ancient and hungry. The Council had thought they were safer without humans. They had believed that exile would bring them the peace they desired. Soon, Jake realized they would discover that some problems could not be solved with words and diplomacy. The galaxy was about to face its greatest challenge. Humanity, the species they had cast out, might be the only hope for survival. Jake looked out at the stars and wondered if they were already too late. Chancellor Vexstar stood frozen in his command center, staring at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. The massive screens around him showed images of destruction unlike anything he had seen in his 300 years of life. Entire star systems were going dark. Planets that had existed for billions of years were simply gone. Sir, we have lost contact with the Tau Ceti system, reported his aide, her voice shaking with fear. All 17 colonies? Over 2 billion beings? The Chancellor's 4 purple eyes focused on the tactical display. Where the Tau Ceti system should have been, there was only empty space. No planets, no moons, no debris, nothing.
This.
Possible, he whispered. The answer came from his science advisor, Dr. Nethka. The enemy ships appear to be processing entire worlds, sir. They strip away the atmosphere, consume the surface, and break down the core 4 materials. On the main, screen security footage from a mining station showed the last moments of the Melodian homeworld. The peaceful, artistic species had tried to evacuate their population when the massive ships arrived. But there had been nowhere to run. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in galactic records. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in metal plates that shifted and moved like living skin. Thousands of smaller craft swarmed around them like insects, tearing apart everything in their path. They call themselves the Devourers, Dr. Nethka continued, reading from her datapad, according to the few survivors we managed to rescue. They consume everything organic and inorganic. Nothing is wasted. 3 days earlier, the first Devourer ship had emerged from the dark space beyond the galactic rim. Long-range sensors had detected its approach, but no one understood what they were seeing. The ship was massive, but it moved in ways that seemed impossible. It bent space around itself, traveling faster than any known technology allowed. Captain? Alina Brooks pushed her small reconnaissance ship to its limits as she fled from the advancing Devourer fleet. Her vessel, the Swift Arrow, was one of the fastest ships humanity had ever built. But even with Marcus Webb's revolutionary engines, she could barely stay ahead of the enemy. Captain, they are gaining on us, reported her pilot, Lieutenant Sam. Parker, those things can match our speed. Lena studied the tactical display. Behind them, 12 Devourer ships pursued like hungry beasts. Their hulls glowed with energy that made space itself ripple and bend. Take us through the asteroid field, Alina ordered. Maybe we can lose them in the rocks. The Swift Arrow danced between floating mountains of stone and metal. Lena had grown up flying through asteroid fields, playing games with her friends. Among the drifting debris, Those childhood skills might save her life. The Devourers followed without hesitation. But something strange happened as they entered the field. Their ships began to scan every asteroid, every piece of floating rock. Mechanical arms extended from their holes, grabbing and consuming everything they touched. "They are eating the asteroids," Sam said in amazement. "They consume everything they find." Alina activated her long-range transmitter. "This is Captain Brooks to all human ships. The enemy consumes all matter they encounter. Pete, they eat everything. Raw materials, refined metals, organic compounds. Nothing is safe." Meanwhile, back in Council space, the combined galactic fleet prepared for battle. Admiral Zethker of the Andromedan Navy commanded 2,000 ships from a dozen different species. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. "All ships report ready," announced his tactical officer. "The enemy fleet approaches the Vega system." Admiral Zethkar studied the enemy formation. 24 massive Devourer ships moved through space like a flowing liquid, their formations changing constantly. Around them swarmed millions of smaller craft, each one the size of a fighter, but packed with unknown weapons. "Open fire when they reach optimal range," the Admiral ordered. The battle began with a spectacular display of firepower. Thousands of energy beams lanced across space, striking the Devourer ships with enough force to destroy planets. Torpedo volleys filled the darkness with explosions that could be seen from neighboring systems. For a moment, it seemed like the galactic fleet might succeed. The Devourer ships staggered under the assault, their hulls glowing white-hot from the impacts. Then the enemy began to adapt. The energy beams that had hurt them seconds before now passed harmlessly through their hulls. The torpedoes exploded, uselessly, against barriers that appeared from nowhere. In less than 10 minutes, the Devourers had analyzed every weapon the galaxy could produce and developed defenses against them all. "Impossible," Admiral Zethkar breathed. "How can they adapt so quickly?" His answer came in the form of return fire. The Devourer weapons were unlike anything in galactic experience. Instead of energy beams or explosive missiles, they fired streams of microscopic machines. These tiny robots swarmed over the galactic ships, taking them apart piece by piece. "Admiral, we are losing ships fast," reported his communications officer. "The Fifth Fleet has been completely destroyed."
The Third Fleet is requesting permission
"To retreat." Admiral Zethkar watched his magnificent fleet dissolve before his eyes. Ships that had taken years to build were consumed in minutes. Crews that had trained for decades died without understanding what killed them. "All ships retreat," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Fall back to the core worlds." But retreat was not possible for many. The Devourer swarms moved faster than most galactic ships could flee. They surrounded retreating vessels and stripped them down to bare metal in seconds. Of the 2,000 ships that had entered battle, fewer than 300 escaped. Back on Nexus Prime, Chancellor Vexstar called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The great hall that had once exiled humanity, now filled with panicked representatives from across the galaxy. "The outer systems are lost," reported General Caxstar of the Military Council. Our fleets cannot stop these Devourers. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them." "What about the core defense grid?" asked Counselor Prex, his artistic people's homeworld now directly threatened. "The grid uses the same energy weapons that failed at Vega," General Caxstar replied. "If the Devourers reach the core systems, nothing will stop them." Silence fell over the chamber as the representatives faced the reality of their situation. The galaxy that had existed for millions of years was ending. Their ancient civilizations, their proud histories, their accumulated knowledge, all of it would be consumed by machines that cared nothing for art or beauty or life. "Something we can do," Chancellor Vexstar said desperately. "Some weapon we have not tried, some defense we have not considered." Ambassador Kethra spoke from her seat near the front. "There is one possibility, Chancellor, but you will not like it. Speak." "The humans," she said quietly. Before their exile, they had different ideas about warfare, different approaches to solving problems. The hall erupted in angry voices. Many representatives still blamed humanity for the conflicts that had led to their exile. The idea of asking humans for help was almost unthinkable. "The humans are gone," Vexter said firmly. "We exiled them 8 years ago. They are beyond the Outer Rim, probably extinct by now." "No, Chancellor," Kethra replied, holding up a datapad. "Our long-range sensors have detected human ships in the outer systems. They not only survived exile, they have grown stronger." "Chancellor!" Vextar felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Desperation. The proud Zephyrian leader who had cast humanity out of the galaxy now faced a choice that would haunt him forever: ask the exiled humans for help, or watch the galaxy die. As if summoned by his thoughts, an aide rushed into the chamber with an urgent message. "Chancellor, we have received a transmission from the human colonies. They offer to meet with a council delegation to discuss the current crisis." Vextar closed his 4 eyes and felt the weight of his mistake crushing down on him. Ago, he had warned the humans that the galaxy would survive without them. He was about to discover just how wrong he had been. Chancellor Vextar stepped off his diplomatic shuttle onto the landing pad of New Eden, his 4 purple eyes wide with shock. The last time he had seen humans, they were leaving the galaxy in defeat and shame. He stood on a world that rivaled anything in council space. The city around him stretched to the horizon, filled with gleaming towers and green parks. Ships moved through the sky in orderly patterns, their designs unlike anything he had ever seen. The air smelled clean and fresh, and he could hear music playing from somewhere in the distance. "Welcome to New Eden, Chancellor," said a familiar voice. Admiral Jake Morrison stepped forward, flanked by 2 other humans Vextar remembered from the exile hearing. The human looked older now, with gray in his hair, but his eyes were still sharp and determined. "Admiral Morrison," Vextar replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Jake nodded toward a waiting transport. "President Holmes is waiting for you at the government center. We have much to discuss." The journey through the city gave Vextar time to see what humanity had built during their exile. Children of different species played together in the parks. Markets sold goods from dozens of worlds. Human and alien workers cooperated on construction projects with easy friendship. "How many species live here?" Vextar asked. "Last count," Jake replied. "They chose to join us rather than stay under council rule." The Chancellor felt a stab of guilt. These were species the council had ignored or dismissed as unimportant. Now they had found prosperity and protection with the exiled humans. President Diana Holmes met them at the entrance to the government building. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a simple style. Unlike the elaborate robes worn by council leaders, she dressed in plain clothes that any citizen might wear. "Chancellor Vextar," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." The formal meeting took place in a simple room with large windows overlooking the city. A star sat across. From President Holmes, Admiral Morrison, and General Paul Mitchell, the commander of human military forces. Dr. Rachel Stevens, a scientist with intelligent brown eyes, sat at the end of the table with several data pads in front of her. "We know why you are here," President Holmes began. "Our long-range sensors have been tracking the Devourer advance. We are sorry for the loss of life in the outer systems." Vextar looked down at his hands. "We made a terrible mistake 8 years ago. We thought peace meant avoiding all conflict. We believed that diplomacy could solve every problem." "Some problems cannot be solved with words," General Mitchell said quietly. "We tried to tell you that." "Yes, you did," Vextar admitted, "and we refused to listen. Now the galaxy is dying, and we have nowhere else to turn." Dr. Stevens leaned forward. "We have been studying the Devourers since they first appeared. Archaeologist Dr. Rodriguez found references to them in ancient ruins. We know what they are and how they operate. Can they be stopped?" Vextar asked desperately. "Yes," Dr. Stevens replied, "but not with traditional weapons. The Devourers use quantum processing networks to adapt their defenses in real time. Energy. Weapons become useless within minutes. Then how do we fight them?" Dr. Stevens activated a holographic display that showed the internal structure of a Devourer ship. Their quantum networks can be disrupted by specific electromagnetic frequencies. We have developed weapons that can generate these frequencies. Vexstar stared at the display. Why did you develop such weapons you had no reason to prepare for? This threat? We had every reason, Admiral Morrison said. The galaxy cast us out for being too violent and too prepared for war, but someone has to be ready when real danger appears. President Holmes stood and walked to the window. The Council's delegation is not the first to arrive here, Chancellor. We have received messages from dozens of species begging for help. Pirates are raiding systems that lost their defense fleets to the Devourers. Slavers are taking advantage of the chaos. We can help with those problems too, General Mitchell added. Our patrol fleets are already protecting refugee convoys and hunting down raiders. Vexstar felt tears forming in his eyes. After everything we did to you, how can you be willing to help us? Because that is what humans do, President Holmes replied simply. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even those who have wronged us. The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a young woman in a military uniform. Lieutenant Amy Brooks saluted the assembled leaders and handed Admiral Morrison an urgent message. Captain Alina Brooks reports that the Devourer main fleet is moving toward the Nexus system. They will reach the galactic capital in 6 days. A heavy silence fell over the room. Nexus Prime was the heart of galactic civilization. If it fell, organized resistance would become impossible. We need to evacuate the capital, Vexstar said. Evacuate 10 billion beings in 6 days. General Mitchell shook his head. Impossible, even if we had enough ships. Then we make our stand there, President Holmes decided. If the galaxy is going to die, it dies fighting. With respect, Madam President, said a new voice from the doorway. Commander Tony Miller entered, followed by several younger humans. Maybe the galaxy does not have to die at all, Amy Brooks stepped forward. My generation has been discussing this situation. We were children when the Council exiled us. We do not carry the same anger our parents do. What are you suggesting? Admiral Morrison asked. We help them, Amy said simply. Not because they deserve it, but because it is the right thing to do. Millions of innocent beings will die if we refuse. Commander Miller nodded. We have the weapons to fight the Devourers. We have the ships to carry those weapons. We have allies who will fight beside us. The cost will be enormous, General Mitchell warned. Many of our people will die in this battle. Many of their people are already dying, Amy replied. And if the Devourers win, they will not stop at the galactic rim. They will come for us. Next. President Holmes looked around the room, studying the faces of her advisors. The decision is not mine alone to make. The people must vote. The vote took place 3 hours later. Every human colony participated through quantum communication links. The debate was fierce and emotional. Many remembered the humiliation of exile and wanted nothing to do with the galaxy that had rejected them. But in the end, the younger generation carried the decision. By a narrow margin, humanity voted to help defend the galaxy. There are conditions, President Holmes told Chancellor Vexstar. 8. Humanity will lead the defense of Nexus Prime. Our ships, our weapons, our tactics. The Council. Fleets will follow human orders. Agreed, Vexstar replied without hesitation. Second, when this war is over, humanity returns to the galaxy as full equals. No more exile. No more being treated as violent barbarians. Agreed. Third, the species that allied with us during our exile will also be granted full council membership. They stood with us when no one else would. Vexstar nodded. I will present these terms to the full council, but I believe they will accept anything that gives us hope. President Holmes extended her hand again. Then we have an agreement, Chancellor. Humanity will help save the galaxy. As they shook hands, both leaders knew they were making history. The species the council had cast out as too violent and unpredictable had become the galaxy's last hope for survival. Outside the window, human ships were already beginning to move. The fleet that would defend Nexus Prime was assembling, carrying weapons that could disrupt the Devourers' quantum networks. The exiled had become the saviors. The question now was whether they were strong enough to win. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Freedom's Call, watching the combined fleet take position around Nexus Prime through the main viewing screen. He could see ships from dozens of species forming defensive lines. Human vessels moved among them, their crews working frantically to install the electromagnetic disruption weapons. "Status report," Jake ordered. 850 ships ready for battle, reported Captain Amy Brooks, now serving as his tactical officer. "All human vessels are equipped with the disruption weapons. We have managed to install the devices on 300 Allied ships." Jake nodded grimly. It was not enough. The Devourer fleet approaching Nexus Prime numbered over 200 massive ships, each one capable of consuming entire planets. But it was all they had. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting the enemy fleet," announced Lieutenant Ben Carter. "They will reach the outer defense perimeter in 2 hours." On the planet below, 10 billion beings waited in terror. The great city continent of Nexus Prime stretched across half the planet's surface. Evacuation had been impossible, so President Holmes had opened the human colonies to refugees. Hundreds of transport ships carried civilians to safety in human space, but most would have to stay and hope the fleet could protect them. Commander Tony Miller floated in space outside the Prime Consumer, the largest Devourer ship ever seen. His small strike team had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of all: board the enemy flagship and plant disruption charges inside its quantum processing core. "Radio silence from here on," Tony whispered into his helmet communicator. "Remember, we only get one chance at this." His team consisted of 12 volunteers from different species: humans, Valari, Cathani, and even 2 former Council Marines who had requested to join the mission. They wore advanced stealth suits designed by Marcus Webb, technology that bent light around them to make them nearly invisible. The Prime Consumer was larger than some moons. Its surface was covered in mechanical structures that shifted and moved like living tissue. Ports opened and closed randomly, releasing swarms of smaller craft that patrolled the area around the massive ship. "There," whispered Sergeant Lisa Park, pointing to a maintenance port near the ship's equator. "That opening has been stable for 10 minutes. The team activated their magnetic boots and began the dangerous journey across the Devourer's hull. Every step was carefully planned. One mistake would alert the ship's defenses and end their mission before it began. Back in space, the battle had begun. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships moved in patterns that hurt to watch, bending space around them as they advanced on the defenders. "All ships commence firing," Jake ordered. The human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of energy beams or missiles, they fired concentrated bursts of electromagnetic radiation tuned to specific frequencies. When these bursts hit the Devourer ships, something amazing happened. The enemy vessels staggered. Their adaptive shields flickered and failed. For the first time since the war began, the Devourers took real damage. "It is working," Amy shouted. With excitement, their quantum networks are disrupting. But the Devourers were not helpless. They began to adapt to the new weapons, just as they had adapted to everything else. Within minutes, some of their ships had developed partial resistance to the electromagnetic attacks. "Focus fire on the ships that are still vulnerable," Jake commanded. "Do not let them all adapt at once." The battle became a race against time. Human ships poured fire into Devourer vessels before they could fully adapt their defenses. Explosions lit up space as enemy ships were destroyed or crippled. But for every Devourer that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. Inside the Prime Consumer, Tony's team moved through corridors that pulsed with alien energy. The ship's interior was like being inside a living creature made of metal and circuits. Walls shifted and reformed around them. Strange lights flickered in patterns that made their eyes water. "The core should be 3 levels down," Tony said, checking his scanner. "Stay together and watch for security systems." They found the first obstacle at the central elevator shaft. Mechanical guardians the size of small vehicles patrolled the area, their sensors sweeping back and forth. The creatures looked like metal spiders with too many legs and glowing red eyes. "Out!" Do we get past them? Asked Private Joe Webb Marcus's younger brother. Tony smiled grimly. We do what humans do best. We improvise. He pulled out a small device that Dr. Stevens had given him, an electromagnetic pulse grenade designed specifically for Devourer technology. When I throw this, we have exactly 30 seconds before their systems reboot. The grenade exploded in a burst of invisible energy. The mechanical guardians froze in place, their red eyes going dark. Tony's team sprinted for the elevator shaft, using magnetic grapples to descend into the ship's core. In space, the battle was turning desperate. The Devourers had adapted to most of the human weapons, and their return fire was devastating. Ships from both sides burned and died in the darkness. Between stars? Admiral, we have lost the third defense line, Amy reported. The enemy is breaking through to the planet. Jake watched as massive Devourer ships began to descend toward Nexus Prime. If they reached the surface, billions would die in minutes. Signal all ships, Jake ordered. Begin the final attack plan. We had hoped to avoid this moment, but there was no choice left. The human fleet would have to get close to the Devourer ships. Close enough to be effective, but close enough to be destroyed in return. All ships, follow my lead, Jake announced. We end this now. The Freedom's call led the charge, followed by every human ship that could still fight. They flew straight into the heart of the enemy formation, their weapons blazing. At point-blank range, the electromagnetic disruptors were devastatingly effective. Devourer ships exploded one after another, but the cost was terrible. Human ships died with every minute that passed. Jake watched his friends and comrades sacrifice themselves to protect a galaxy that had once cast them out. In the Prime Consumer's core, Tony's team had reached their target. The Quantum Processing Center was a sphere of pure energy surrounded by crystalline structures that hummed with power. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Plant the charges around the outer ring, Tony ordered. We have 5 minutes before the ship detects us. His team worked with desperate efficiency. Each charge was carefully positioned to create a cascade failure that would destroy the ship's ability to think and adapt. Charges set, reported Sergeant Park. Ready for detonation.
Ow.
Tony looked around at his team. Good people from different worlds, all risking everything to save the galaxy. It has been an honor serving with you all. He activated the detonation sequence. The explosion tore through the Prime Consumer like lightning. The massive ship's lights flickered and died as its quantum brain was destroyed. Without its central coordination, the entire Devourer fleet began to malfunction. The enemy fleet is breaking apart, Amy shouted. Ships are losing power, but victory came at a price. Prime Consumer's destruction had created a massive explosion that caught several human ships in its blast. Among them was the Freedom's. Call? Jake felt his ship shaking apart around him. Emergency lights flickered as systems failed one by one. But through the chaos, he could see that the plan had worked. The Devourer fleet was defeated. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison, he said into his communicator. The galaxy is safe. Make sure everyone knows that humanity kept its promise. Those were his last words before the Freedom's call broke apart, taking Jake Morrison into the peaceful darkness of space. 6 months later, Admiral Amy Brooks stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council. The Great Hall had been damaged in the battle, but it had been repaired and expanded to include seats for the new member species. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid, said Chancellor Vexstar, his voice heavy with emotion. You saved us all. Amy smiled. We did what we had to do. What we will always do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. She looked out at the assembled representatives, humans and aliens sitting together as equals. It had taken a war to teach the galaxy that diversity was strength, that different perspectives were valuable. The Devourer threat is ended, Amy continued. But there are still unexplored regions of space, still species that need help, still problems that need solving. She gestured to the mixed crews visible through the hall's windows. Humanity requests permission to lead joint exploration missions into unknown space. We want to make sure that when the next threat appears, the galaxy will be ready." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every species agreed on something. As Amy left the hall, she thought about Jake Morrison and all the others who had died to make this moment possible. The galaxy had learned that humans were not violent. Barbarians, but protectors. Not troublemakers, but problem solvers. The exile was over. Humanity had come home.